Captain Kate McHugh had seen many things in her 19 years of sailing the high seas, but nothing like what lay ahead of her now. The Celebrity Edge, her pride and responsibility, had departed that morning with the usual precision, cutting through the unpredictable Atlantic waves. Kate was used to the ebb and flow of ocean life, but today something was different. The sky was darker, the air thicker with a strange tension, as if the ocean itself was holding its breath. During a routine inspection of the ship, something caught her eye. A small crowd had gathered at the starboard side, murmuring excitedly. The whispers swirled around one word, mermaid. With a raised brow, Kate approached, half skeptical, half curious. One of the crew members handed her a pair of binoculars, excitement tingling in the air. Kate lifted them to her eyes and scanned the water. At first, there was nothing but the familiar blue of the waves. But then, just beyond the wake, something broke the surface. A figure, small and distant, with a tail-like form glinting in the sun. Kate's heart skipped a beat. It was unmistakable, a fish-like tail, shimmering silver and blue as it flicked through the waves. Could it really be? But as the figure came closer, an eerie silence fell over the crew. The excitement was quickly replaced by unease. Kate narrowed her focus on the creature, her stomach tightening. The face was human, or at least, it appeared to be. But there was something deeply unsettling about it, something wrong. The features were twisted, almost grotesque, like a reflection in shattered glass. Its eyes, large and black, locked onto the ship with an unnatural intensity. The closer it got, the more the illusion of a mermaid dissolved. What they had first thought was a tail now seemed like an elongated, scaled appendage, slick and sickly green. Its skin was mottled with patches of decaying flesh, and instead of the delicate beauty they had imagined, this creature was nightmarish, a grotesque blend of sea life and something far more sinister. An icy chill ran down Kate's spine as the crew backed away from the edge, their faces pale with horror. It wasn't a mermaid at all. It was something far worse, something ancient and malevolent, as if it had crawled out from the deepest, darkest trenches of the ocean. The creature let out a high-pitched wail, a sound that sent shockwaves of terror through everyone on board, before diving beneath the waves. For a moment, there was silence. Then the waters around the ship began to churn violently, as if disturbed by some unseen force. Kate quickly issued orders for the ship to move away, but she knew in her gut that they had just witnessed something that defied all logic, something they were never meant to see. The Celebrity Edge pressed forward, but the mood on board remained haunted. What had started as a strange, curious discovery had turned into a nightmare that no one could shake. Kate knew the sea held its secrets, but this was a secret meant to stay buried in the depths. Whatever that thing was, it wasn't done with them yet. The air aboard the Celebrity Edge remained thick with unease, the once bustling ship now eerily quiet. Conversations were reduced to whispers, and the passengers, sensing something had gone wrong, gathered in small, anxious groups. Captain Kate McHugh stood on the bridge, staring out over the darkened waters, her thoughts racing. What they had witnessed was not just an anomaly, it was a threat, and she felt it in her bones. As the ship continued its course, Kate couldn't shake the sense that they were being watched. She instructed the crew to stay alert, making sure no one ventured too close to the edge of the ship. Hours passed, and just when she thought the strange encounter might fade into memory, the first officer, Mark Evans, approached her, his face pale. "Captain," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "you need to see this." Kate followed him to the ship's surveillance room. On the screen, the security footage captured something disturbing. Just beyond the ship's stern, beneath the surface of the water, shadows swirled. At first, it seemed like nothing more than ocean currents, but as the footage continued, the shadows took shape. Several dark, slithering figures were moving alongside the ship, staying just out of sight. Her heart raced. "What are they?" Kate asked, more to herself than to anyone else. Before Mark could respond, a loud thud echoed from the hull of the ship, reverberating through the metal floors. It was followed by another and another. The ship shuddered as though something massive was brushing against it from below. The crew scrambled, alarmed, but no one could identify the source of the disturbance. Kate rushed back to the bridge, issuing commands. "Full speed ahead. I want us out of these waters now." The engines roared to life, and the ship accelerated, plowing through the waves. But the thudding continued, growing louder and more frequent. Whatever was beneath them wasn't letting go. The passengers, already on edge, began to panic. Screams and shouts echoed down the corridors as rumors of sea monsters spread like wildfire. The crew worked tirelessly to calm everyone, but it was clear they were all shaken to their core. Then, as if in response to their terror, something breached the surface of the water near the bow of the ship. It was massive, larger than anything Kate had ever seen in her years at sea. The creature rose from the depths, its scaly body glistening in the dim light. It had the twisted, alien appearance of the creature they had first spotted, but this one was far more imposing, its monstrous head adorned with what looked like jagged, coralline-crusted horns. The ship rocked as the creature let out a deafening roar, a sound so unnatural and guttural that it made the very air vibrate. Kate grabbed hold of the railing as she stared at the beast in horror. Its eyes, black and bottomless, fixated on the ship. It circled them, moving with an unsettling grace for something so large. "Captain," shouted Mark, pointing to the waters below. More of the creatures, smaller, but just as terrifying, were swarming around the ship, their long, eel-like bodies cutting through the waves with deadly precision. They were surrounding the Celebrity Edge, closing in from every direction. "We're trapped," Kate muttered under her breath, her mind racing. There was no way they could outrun these things. Whatever they were, they had the advantage, and it was clear they weren't going to let the ship leave without a fight. With quick thinking, Kate turned to her communications officer. "Send out a distress signal, all frequencies. Get the Coast Guard. Get anyone." She knew it was a long shot out here in the middle of the Atlantic. Help was hours away at best, but it was their only chance. The crew hurried to comply, but the ship continued to shudder under the relentless assault from below. Cracks began to form in the lower decks as the creatures slammed into the hull, and water started to leak in. Kate's heart sank. They needed a miracle. Just then, one of the creatures made its move. With a powerful flick of its tail, it launched itself out of the water, crashing onto the deck with a sickening thud. It let out a screech, its gaping more revealing rows of sharp, jagged teeth. The crew scattered, scrambling to avoid its lashing tail and snapping jaws. Kate grabbed a flare gun from a nearby cabinet and aimed at the creature, firing. The flare struck it in the side, and with a hiss, it recoiled, retreating back into the water. But Kate knew it wasn't over. The creatures were relentless, and more of them were circling, waiting for their moment. As the ship creaked and groaned under the strain, Kate made a quick decision. "Abandon ship," she ordered, her voice steady despite the chaos. "Get the lifeboats ready. We're not going to survive this if we stay aboard." The crew rushed to follow her command, lowering the lifeboats into the churning waters below. Passengers, terrified and confused, were ushered toward the boats, but panic threatened to overwhelm them. Kate stood at the edge, ensuring that as many people as possible made it to safety. But as the first few lifeboats hit the water, Kate's worst fear was realized. The creatures, sensing their prey escaping, surged toward the lifeboats, their eyes glowing with malicious intent. Kate's hands tightened into fists. She had to think of something, and fast. Captain Kate McHugh's heart pounded as the lifeboats touched the water, and the monstrous creatures swarmed toward them. Time seemed to slow, the terror of the moment hanging thick in the air. Kate could see the panic in the eyes of the passengers, their desperate attempts to flee met with the horrifying reality that these creatures were not about to let them escape. "Keep calm, get everyone into the boats," Kate shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. But inside, she knew it was a race against time. The largest of the creatures, its coralline-crusted horns gleaming menacingly, surged ahead of the others, swimming directly toward one of the loaded lifeboats. With a roar that rattled the air, it raised its massive body and slammed into the boat, splitting it in two. The passengers screamed as they were thrown into the water, flailing helplessly as the creature circled them. Kate's stomach churned, but she couldn't afford to freeze. "We need to draw them away from the lifeboats." She yelled to Mark Evans, who was by her side, equally shaken, but still holding his ground. How Mark shouted back, panic rising in his voice as he pointed at the water. "They're everywhere." A spark of an idea flickered in Kate's mind. It was dangerous, reckless even, but it was the only shot they had. "We need to make some noise," she said, turning toward the communications officer. "Get me control of the ship's PA system full blast." The officer nodded, his hands shaking as he patched her through. Kate grabbed the microphone, her voice steady with purpose. "Everyone, brace yourselves. Things are about to get loud." With a flick of the switch, she activated the ship's emergency alarm system, cranking up the volume to maximum. A deafening blare of sirens rang out across the ship, cutting through the air with such intensity that even the crew flinched. The sound echoed across the ocean, startling the creatures. The water churned violently as the creatures recoiled, their sleek bodies twisting and thrashing in confusion. The alarm's high-pitched frequency seemed to disorient them, buying precious moments for the passengers to scramble into the remaining lifeboats. "It's working," Mark shouted, hope glinting in his eyes for the first time. But Kate wasn't done yet. "We need to give them a target, something to chase away from the lifeboats," she said, her mind working rapidly. She looked up at the bridge, then down at the ship's bow. An idea crystallized. "We'll use the ship itself." "What do you mean?" Mark asked, his brow furrowing. "I'm going to steer the ship directly toward them, make the edge the target," Kate explained. "It'll draw them away from the lifeboats. Once they're distracted, we'll abandon ship too." Mark stared at her, realization dawning. "You're going to ram them?" "More like get their attention, then steer away. But yes, it's a gamble." Mark hesitated, but he saw the determination in Kate's eyes. He nodded. "I'll help get everyone off." As Mark and the crew worked to get the last of the passengers into lifeboats, Kate rushed back to the bridge. Her hands moved with precision as she adjusted the controls, turning the ship to face the heart of the swarm. She could see the creatures writhing just beneath the surface, disoriented by the sound, but still closing in. Taking a deep breath, Kate pushed the throttle forward. The Celebrity Edge lurched, its engines roaring to life as it surged ahead, cutting through the water toward the monstrous creatures. The ship's blaring alarms echoed across the waves, louder and more piercing with each passing second. The largest creature, the one with the coral-encrusted horns, lifted its head from the water, locking its soulless black eyes on the ship. It let out a guttural roar, the sound vibrating through Kate's chest. The others followed, turning their attention away from the lifeboats and focusing on the massive vessel hurtling toward them. "They're coming," shouted one of the crew from the deck below. Kate gripped the wheel, her heart racing. She could see the creatures converging in front of the ship, their sleek bodies slicing through the water with terrifying speed. Just as they were about to collide, Kate jerked the wheel hard to the left, steering the ship away at the last possible second. The creatures, momentarily thrown off by the maneuver, lashed out, but the edge had already changed course. The largest of the beasts lunged out of the water, smashing into the side of the ship, its massive body rocking the vessel. The impact sent a shudder through the Celebrity Edge, but the ship held its course. Kate spun the wheel again, dodging another creature that leaped from the water. Her hands were steady, her focus razor-sharp. She knew the ship couldn't withstand much more of this, but it didn't have to. All they needed was a little more time. Below, the last of the lifeboats was being lowered into the water. The passengers, still in shock, were hurried aboard by the remaining crew. Mark signaled to Kate from the deck, giving her a thumbs up. "Now or never," Kate muttered to herself. She released the wheel and sprinted toward the deck, her heart pounding in her ears. The ship was still moving, its alarms blaring, drawing the creatures farther away from the lifeboats. Kate reached the edge and, with a deep breath, grabbed a rope and slid down to the waiting lifeboat below. As she hit the water, she glanced back at the Celebrity Edge, her ship, her responsibility. It was still barreling forward, but the creatures were closing in, their dark shapes circling like sharks. She knew the ship wouldn't survive much longer, but it had done its job. It had given them the chance to escape. Kate climbed into the lifeboat, joining Mark and the remaining crew. They rowed away as fast as they could, the sound of the ship's alarms fading into the distance. The creatures, now furious, turned their attention back to the ship. With a final, monstrous roar, the largest of them lunged at the Celebrity Edge, smashing into its hull with devastating force. The ship shuddered, then began to tilt as the creatures continued their relentless assault. Within moments, the great vessel started to sink, disappearing beneath the waves as the creatures dragged it down to the depths of the ocean. In the lifeboat, the survivors watched in stunned silence as the Celebrity Edge vanished from sight. The sea grew calm, the creatures retreating back into the dark waters from which they had come, leaving nothing but silence in their wake. Captain Kate McHugh sat in the lifeboat, her hands trembling. She had lost her ship, but she had saved her crew, her passengers. As the sun began to rise on the horizon, casting a pale light over the endless ocean, Kate couldn't help but wonder what dark secrets still lurked beneath the waves, waiting to be discovered. For now, though, they had survived, and that was all that mattered.